Some of my biggest mistakes have been honest mistakes. But my recollection and my view of things looking back was that nobody had really been on me about my drinking, and they had not been asking me to stop drinking. People around me, I came from a drinking family, not necessarily alcoholic, but my brother and sisters drank. My mom drinks, and my dad had passed away by now, but he drank as well. But again, alcohol didn't seem like an intrusive part of our family. There was alcohol. And so there were people who they weren't telling me not to drink. They said, but don't drink so much, and don't drink so often, and don't drink it there, and don't drink it with them, and don't drink it tonight, and don't drink it that fast, and you know, and so it's really just like our book says, and like we talked about, they wanted me to control and enjoy my drinking. And it was a mystery why, to them and to me, why I seemed unable to do that. So they weren't telling me to stop drinking. They were telling me that I was irresponsible, that I was immature, that I needed to grow up, that I needed to be a man, that I needed to be the husband I needed to be. I needed to be the father I should be. I should be the son, the employee. I worked in a family business. I mean, it was just very much like this. And I couldn't answer the question why. So that lawyer said to me, he said, Steve, he was looking at the accident report and the arrest report. He said, you think you've got a drinking problem? And I said, what I think I got is a legal problem, pal, and I wish you would focus all your time and attention on this legal dilemma, you know. Yeah. Thanks for the sermon, but let's get some, you know, let's get to work on springing me. And he did. Now I will tell you, some years later, I got the opportunity to write him a letter. And tell him what my experience had been. Because as that played out, we finally ended up with a plea bargain. They were trying to put me in jail for a year because of these, again, this was ended up being my sixth conviction, and I'd been arrested numerous other times for alcohol and driving related offenses. I'd totaled 6 automobiles, and I'd not been a very nice character the night that they had arrested me, so I had no friends on the police department or in the prosecutor's office, so they were really kind of pushing for this. And he ended up getting me the plea bargain. He came out after being back there for a while, and he said, Steve, good news. He said, 60 days in jail. And I said, you know, man, I don't think I'm a 60-day in jail guy. And I meant it. I said, you know, I am just the poster boy for middle-class alcoholism. You know, it's just, really, I got no, and it always amazes me when I'm invited someplace to tell my story because I don't have a dramatic drunk-a-lot. And my adventures after aren't terribly dramatic in the circumstances. But what is miraculous is the experience of my life from the inside out. And that's really what Alcoholics Anonymous does. Oh, certainly our circumstances can change for the better. But the fact is that neither my physical sobriety nor my emotional sobriety need be tied to circumstances. I hope it is not a circumstantial recovery that I have today. So it's the experience of this life is what AA has done for me. Claudio, what you and I were talking about, a profound alteration in my reaction to life. Life happens, but I'm experiencing it differently. But I got no great stories. I'll make a couple up before we're done. And so when we ended up, I said, you know, would you go back and talk to him one more time? And he did. He went back in there, and, you know, I'll forever be grateful. He came back out, and he said, here's the deal, Stephen, it's not going to get any better. He said, 10 weekends in jail, and you go to residential treatment for drug and alcohol rehabilitation. Now, I wasn't really sure what drug and alcohol rehabilitation was. It sounded painful to me, but it also, I really say sometimes it's just a math problem, you know. Even my rudimentary math skills could figure out that 10 weekends in jail is 20 days, and treatment is 28 days, and that's 38 days, or whatever it is, 48 days versus 60 days, and I said, so if it had been the other way around, neither of these was more or less appealing to me than the other. But I said, okay, I'll do that. And I waited almost a full year before, in fact, I did wait a full year before going to that treatment facility on July the 1st. So on June the 29th, my wife and I went out to dinner with 3 other couples, going to have kind of a last hurrah before I was going away to this treatment center. And we came home. I had an amaretto on the rocks. I smoked a joint and I went to bed. On June the 30th, Connie and I took our then 5-year-old daughter Abby to Chuck E. Cheese to spend the day before Daddy's going away on this 28-day business trip. And you know, I say that I really didn't, that there wasn't much, you know, drama and wild adventures, but if there is anybody new or somebody who hasn't stopped drinking, I always do make a kind of just a announcement, public service announcement. If you haven't stopped drinking yet, don't spend your first day sober at Chuck E. Cheese. It's loud in there, and they're just coming at you. You can't see them. You know, they're about her size, and they're just coming from everywhere. And you know, I'm already a little quick, and then just when you think you got it together, this big giant mouse is walking toward you, and you kind of go, is this real or not? And honey, do you see the mouse? And so, you know, and I want to tell you something. I hope we have a good time tonight. And the reason, my friend Scott says that laughter is the sound effect of recovery. And so I hope we have a good time, and I hope we have a few laughs, but I would never want to mask the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I would never want you to think for a moment that while these things were going on that they were funny. You guys know that. You know, at the moment, I'm looking back at my life and I see the absurdity of alcoholism in my life. But when I'm going through it, man, I can't figure it out. Life is just happening to me, and I don't have a clue. And it was hard, and it was confusing, and it just came with a myriad of emotions that were impossible for me to label and articulate. I couldn't have told you what my problem was. I couldn't have told you how I felt. I couldn't have told you what was going on. But I look back now to today's prism, and the only reason some of these things are kind of funny is because of the time and distance and perspective, and that I'm not in the middle of that anymore. We spent that day, and the next morning my friend Ricky came over, and Ricky's going to drive me off to treatment. And Connie came out. Now, I get to kind of support that. I know a lot of people in AA don't get. Connie came out on the porch, and as we were leaving, she says, "No matter what, honey, don't stop drinking." And Connie's sobriety date is 10 days after mine now, and I got to tell you that, and it's a real important 10 days to me too, by the way. If you get 10 days on your partner, don't give it up. You know, we have a little argument or disagreement sometime, and I said, well, just wait 10 days, baby. It'll come clear to you. And you know, she just hates that, of course. I came in from a conference a few years ago late on a Sunday night, and I was easing into bed, and she woke up and rolled over and was greeting me, and she went, "You didn't tell them that 10-day thing, did you?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, baby, they love it. I got to tell them that." And she said, "It makes me so angry." I said, "I know, but in 10 days it won't." And now I want to tell you something from the bottom of my heart, that I aspire to be the AA member that my wife is. And we're so grateful for the relationship that we have and what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for us. And I called home. Butch asked me if I'd talk to Connie this afternoon. I called her just about an hour before I came down here, and I got she and my daughter Abby. Abby's 25 now, and she's been back home living with us for about the last 8 months. And they were out going to catch a movie. And you know, I was out at a conference 3 weeks ago, and I called home, and Abby answered the phone, and I said, "What's going on, baby?" And she said, "Dad, it's just another normal day here at the Lee House where nothing is normal." And and they were doing whatever they were doing. But you know, I'm just so grateful. I will tell you that that when my daughter was born, December the 17th of 1983, I was drunk. And Connie and I were at the house, and Connie didn't drink during her pregnancy, but I drank for both of us, and I was doing an assortment of other things, and all of a sudden it was time to go to the hospital, and we went to the hospital, and now I didn't want to go back in the delivery room because I just because I'm so selfish, but I'm so self-conscious, and I was so uncomfortable. And they finally talked me into going back there, and she had a C-section, and Abby was born. And I will tell you that that for years, when people would talk about the experience of their child being born, and share that with other at little dinner parties and different stuff, I made up a story that I told. I didn't remember that night. I had a sketchy memory, and I had to fill in the blanks, and I just made something up that became my story. And it was years later before I could admit it to myself, and a few years after that before I shared it with Connie and Abby. Duh. About 6 months ago, Abby and I were driving. We were headed downtown to listen to a friend of mine play music in Nashville, and somebody in my family had indicated that they thought maybe I was spending a little too much time in this AA thing. And not being disrespectful, really saying, Steve, I think you could stay sober without all that stuff you're doing. Basically you could cut back a little bit and stay sober. And I was just kind of sharing that with Abby. And she said, Dad, she said, you and Mom do more than stay sober. You help people. Now, I'm not confused about the level of help but I thought, what a privilege that my daughter views me and her mother as people who are living purposeful lives. That she looks at us and sees something that she respects us. And we love each other's company, and that's a real gift, and it's a gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. That change of character. That's not the guy that showed up here. And so that's a gift. Ricky's driving me over to that treatment center, and he says to me, he says, Steve, what do you think this deal's going to be like, man? I said, I don't have a clue, Ricky. I said, but I will tell you one thing. I'd seen a TV movie of the week or two, and I said, I'm not going to get some little circle and go, I'm Steve, I'm an alcoholic, and whine about the most intimate details of my life, and about 3 weeks later, I was just telling people more than they wanted to know about me, and I started making stuff up, too, because because I'm not a tough guy, and I needed some AA street cred, so, yeah. So I started, talking. I started cursing more than normal. I started dressing down. I felt like I'm giving up something, so somehow I just wanted to I don't know. I don't know exactly what I was trying to hold on to, but it was something that wasn't worth holding on as tight as I was. And you guys heard me share today that they gave me that assessment, and I went through that deal. And then that was on a Saturday, and the normal staff, the regular staff wasn't there. It was kind of a skeleton crew on the weekend. And the next day, Sunday, was the first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that I ever went to, that I was ever a part of. Actually, 2 men came into the treatment facility to bring a meeting. Mary Jane, you probably know them both. There was Jerry Crow, who's passed away, and a guy named George A., who's still around, lives out in Franklin. And those guys came in, and they did what I believe Alcoholics Anonymous suggests we do. Now, I don't know about you folks, and I don't know if some of you had a treatment experience, and I want to tell you up front, I could not be more grateful for the treatment experience that I had. But what I realize is that treatment and AA serve different purposes, and they're both valuable, but they're different. And in treatment, it felt like to me that all day long they were trying to convince me I was an alcoholic. I mean, they were asking me questions about my drinking. They were asking me questions about my behavior when I drank. They were gathering evidence. It's like I'd been charged with the crime of alcoholism, and they were prosecuting me of the charges and presenting me evidence and saying, see, Steve? I mean, clearly, you see? And I get that. And then these 2 guys came in from Alcoholics Anonymous, and our book says that the ex-problem drinker in whom the problem has been solved, properly armed with the facts about himself, can win over the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a matter of hours or days. And that's what those guys came in, and they didn't ask me anything about me. They came in because they valued their sobriety and their recovery, and they were grateful enough to offer that, but not so that they would impose that upon me or anyone else there. They shared openly about themselves, about their alcoholism, about the solution that they had found. They weren't on a membership drive for AA. You know, they weren't trying to close the deal. They didn't take me over in the closing room and get me to sign anything like, you know, like the gym I joined, you know, and they didn't have a special for another 2 days if you get in, you know. They just said, hey, man, this is what was going on with us. And if any of this catches your attention, come on, we're in. We'll do what we can to help you, which is really just share with you what we've got and what people have shared with us. And I used to say that nothing really big happened that night, and what I would say, something magical happened that night, but it was almost imperceptible to me. I didn't take the AA altar call. You know, I didn't go, oh, let go and let God, boys, I'm in. You know, I didn't jump in the middle or anything. What happened is that when they left, I felt better for them having been there. When they left, I said, I wonder if they'll come back. I wonder if I'll ever see that guy again. And I don't remember the information necessarily. Now, they shared information. I know that was helpful. I know that I heard something about that allergy that was new to me. And I know I heard something about this powerlessness that was new to me. But I didn't get it on any type of intellectual level. But see, I know what those guys were doing was speaking the language of the heart. And that the message of recovery that Alcoholics Anonymous has isn't an intellectual exercise. It isn't a piece of information that changes things. You offer me some actions to take that change things. We connect not on a intellectual level, but at a heart level, at a spiritual level. The message that they brought, as our book says, the message that will attract an alcoholic must have weight and depth. And they brought a message of weight and depth. Not that I recognized any of that. The experience I had, I couldn't have explained, but I know looking back, I had it. What it did was open my mind up just a little bit to that next thing, into that next thing, into that next thing, until finally I just fell right into the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. We went out to meetings on a nightly basis, and I want to be clear, and I said it today, that we went to several different 12-step programs, and we were welcomed at all of them. And I got to tell you, I'm the guy. I have to be careful that I'm not the guy in my group that when the treatment center bus pulls up, I don't go, oh, they're going to drink all their coffee, they're going to talk during the meeting, they're going to scoot chairs around. You know, I want you to show up knowing all the rules. You know, now that I'm better, why don't you just act better and get over there? You know. But people were so welcoming to me. Alcoholics Anonymous was a place where people let me learn. You let me stay around long enough to get rooted in what happens here. You didn't expect me to show up knowing the game. And I've got to remember that myself when the next new guy or gal comes in the room. Let me stay here long enough. By the way, you still let me stay when I make mistakes. This is not a place where we don't make mistakes. What better place to make a mistake than Alcoholics Anonymous? What better place to trip up with people who want to help me up and help me move on? So I'm not through making those. I stayed in that, I obviously stayed the full 28 days, and I was getting attracted to Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't, I don't know that I could have explained it, but I know that I was looking forward to going out the next time, and as I was telling Claudio, I'd go to that meeting, and then I would be going back over to 202, the clubhouse there, and I'd say, I wonder if that guy's going to be there. Dr. Charles. He's one of the first men that I heard over there. It's a black man over in the corner, and we were all in there one Friday night for the meeting, and this guy talked, and I thought, I've never heard anything like that. But what was so fascinating is then the next guy would share, and I went, no, that's the smartest guy in the world. I've never heard anything like that. And I'd go, no, that woman is the smartest woman. And I'm thinking, how did people this bright end up in Alcoholics Anonymous? They must be counselors or something. And I was amazed at the quality of people. See, when I headed off to that treatment center, I thought I'm not like those people. I was uncomfortable with who was going to be my roommate, what kind of person I'm going to have to be with. When I went to that jail on those weekends, I thought I'm different than these people. I'm not like these people. And when I started going to those first AA meetings, I thought I'm not like these people. I want to tell you something. That not only am I like you, but I am so privileged to be in your company, see. I never would have dreamed that. The magic that happened for me in Alcoholics Anonymous is that one day when I wasn't looking, I turned from a guy that can't drink to a guy that doesn't drink, from a guy that had to go to AA to a guy that gets to go to AA. This became not some penance for me to pay, but a privilege to be a part of. My life in Alcoholics Anonymous changed from somebody who was running from what happened to him to being drawn to the light that's in front of me. You know, I'm still watching back here. I don't want to fall back. I don't want to take it for granted. But this is less about me trying to avoid that problem than I'm so attracted to where I'm going in the life you've given me here. It's a real different perspective on things for me. And that's not because I've gotten any smarter. That's the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. I came out of that treatment center, and you know what, I'm going to drop back. I always tell my I'm supposed to tell you what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now, and I always say I'm going to do that, but not necessarily in order. And my story's kind of like a Quentin Tarantino movie, you know, and there's no time and space continuum. So I'll just tell a host of seemingly unrelated stories, and hopefully they'll make sense by the end of the hour. So I'll tell you a little bit about the beginning. I grew up in Smyrna, Tennessee, which is a small town just outside of Nashville, about 30 miles outside of Nashville. Middle-class family. I've got an older sister, an older brother, and a younger sister. My younger sister's 10 years younger than me. My older brother's 4 years. My older sister's 5 years. Nothing major happening. Mom and Dad were together. Nobody was knocking anybody around. The circumstances of my life were not challenging. There was no circumstantial reason for me to be an alcoholic. In my experience, circumstances don't cause alcoholism. Tough circumstances don't cause it. Good circumstances don't prevent it. I can appreciate that challenging circumstances might cause someone to seek relief in a drink a little sooner, maybe, than somebody else. I was a good kid. I was a compliant kid. I went where I said I was going to go. I was with who I said I was going to be with. I came home when I said I was going to come home. I did that all through high school. I was the kind of kid that other kids told their parents, you know, Steve's going to be there. It must, you know, so it must be okay. And I did those things. And you know, when I was in treatment, a guy that had probably been sober about half hour longer than me diagnosed me with something. He said, Steve, I think you're passive aggressive. And you know, I didn't want to be alcoholic, so I'm interested in this passive aggressive thing. I said, tell me, what do you mean passive aggressive? You know, I might be willing. And he says, well, it just means that you don't like the way things are most of the time, but you're just too big a chicken shit to do anything about it. And I said, man, that is me. I walked around quietly disappointed in a way that I'm not sure other people, I don't think, recognized it. A dissatisfaction that went unspoken. An insecurity that probably went undetected. An inability when two of my good friends, this seems so silly, you know, but I think it really describes the kind of guy that I was and can be. When two of my best friends in our neighborhood would be outside playing in the yard, I didn't know whether I could go over and join them. I'm not sure if they really want me. I'm not sure if I'll be in the way. I need to be called and asked. When I got sober in AA, I started going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and like I said, I'm going to zip around, so strap in. But if I don't say it when I'm thinking about it, it just won't get said. And so you flash forward, and now I'm sober in AA. I'm sober about 6 months before I realized people are talking to each other between meetings. Some people are building personal relationships in Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought you just went to the meeting and scurried home. You come in and scurry home, and it's nice. I'm enjoying it, but I didn't know that you guys actually sometimes kind of hung out. Then I heard people starting saying, hey, we're going to lunch at Shoney's. You want to go? You know, they would make a general announcement. We're going to lunch at Shoney's. Anybody wants to go? Let's go. You guys know how that is in your group. And, man, I desperately wanted to go. Desperately. But I was afraid to go. And I would get in the car, and I'd think about going. But I said, what if I get over there, and there's 6 of them at a table for 6? And I don't know whether I'm supposed to pull up the 7th chair or not. Is that an imposition? Did they really mean me? Did they, you know, so I didn't need this, this general invitation. What I needed was 3 or 4 people to come over and go, Steve, we have been talking. We really want you to go to lunch with us. And we're just arguing over who gets to sit next to you. And I needed that, you know, because I was just so uncertain. That's loneliness. That's loneliness in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a lack of connection to the people around me. It's an inability to overcome that. And I'll talk about that some more in just a little while. I grew up there this morning. Now, finally, I'm going to, I pop out of high school, and I will tell you, our book says that if a mere code of morals or philosophy of living were sufficient, many of us would have recovered long ago. And what I would tell you is that my code of morals and my philosophy of living were sufficient. Right up to the moment they were no longer sufficient. They worked for a long time, but I guess I've got a progressive disease. And so and it seemed to coincide with my first drink that philosophy and that code kind of went by the wayside. But two buddies came by, and I'd made a decision not to drink. I just wasn't going to be a drinker. It wasn't a big deal. I played athletics. I did things, and I was a good kid. I'm just not going to drink. And I was around people who drank and did drugs and stuff. I wasn't a goody two-shoes. I was out where the action was, but I had a code that was sufficient. And finally, two buddies of mine came by one night. We were going to go back to a basketball game. And I'll never forget, in the back of a 1968 Volkswagen Bug, canary yellow. My buddy Doug hands back a bottle of Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine. And I took a drink. It went around. It was sweet, just like that last drink. They're both kind of, it's embarrassing, but it's all I got. And started taking a pull off that wine. It went around 2 or 3 or 4 times. I don't know at what point I had the experience that so many people talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous, but the experience I had was all of a sudden, I couldn't wait to get where we were going, because I thought they couldn't wait to see me when we got there. And I don't think I'd ever felt that at ease and that confident and that self-assured, and all of a sudden the back seat of that Volkswagen wouldn't hold me, and I couldn't wait to spring myself on an unsuspecting world. And I had a wonderful evening, and I blacked out that night. I had some lost time, and I regularly lost time when I drank, so that didn't seem, since it happened from the first time on, it didn't seem peculiar. And I don't know if I was alcoholic just before I took that drink, and I don't know if I was alcoholic just after I took that drink. I have some opinions, but I don't get too caught up in the debate. So I don't know if I drank alcoholically from that moment on, because I drank enthusiastically from that moment on. And see, I don't know, lack of power doesn't seem to be a problem until you try to exert some power that you don't have. If that door is locked, that is no problem for me until about 9 or 9:30 tonight, when I want out the door. Whether I could control my drinking or not was moot. I didn't try. Our book says that while there's no way of proving it, they believe, that First 100 say, they believe that many of them could have stopped drinking early in their drinking career. And it dawns on me the reason they can't prove it is because they didn't try it. Nobody knows, because they didn't try. Why would I try to control my drinking at that point? And by the time I try to exert some power, I don't have the necessary power. So I'm going to tell you 3 quick drinking stories just to illustrate the drinking part. And I want to tell you the biggest part, what alcoholism stole from me is less the things that happened when I was drinking, the escapades, but it was the sacrifice of that integrity and giving away who I was, and that loss of sense of self, and those are the things that were the killer. But the escapades, our book says, kind of range from comic to pitiful to embarrassing to tragic, and I touched on all of those a little bit, but. I was going there to MTSU. I'll tell you, this is one that usually doesn't make it into my story because I don't have time for them all, but it was, I was going to school there. I was living at home because my dad had passed away, and I was making this 30-mile commute, but I stayed out a lot with friends and didn't get home, and I wasn't a very good son to my mom during that period, who was having to deal with my dad's loss in her own way. And But anyway, I came to one morning. It was a little chilly and damp, and I looked up. I was trying to figure out where I was, and as it turns out, I was wedged down in the bleachers at the baseball field. And you know, I was down in that little area where you put your feet between the bleachers. And I finally came to, and I got up, and it was about 7 in the morning, 7:30. I don't have a clue why I'm there, how I got there. I'm a little confused, but I look for my car. I finally find my car and take off. And I'm thinking that's a little odd, that's weird. And then by that evening, I'm over at some friend's apartment, and we're partying, and I'm drinking, and now I'm telling this story, and I'm wearing it like a badge of honor. I got so drunk. Let me tell you how messed up I got last night. Let me tell you what happened to me, as I often do. And then about 2 weeks later, I came to one morning, and I'm wedged down between the bleachers. And I'm thinking, man, it's like I've bought a season ticket. I'm at the exact same place. I'm over in the right field bleachers. Like I said, it's like I've got a reserved seat, and I know that this isn't normal behavior. And I know this because I look around the stadium and nobody else is getting up and going, "Hey, morning, Steve," and I'm the only guy there. It'd be different, at checkout time tomorrow. There'll be a lot of folks out there checking out, but there was nobody else checking out of the baseball stadium that morning. And I never told anybody about that till I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. That became now even my drinking is beginning to cross a line that I'm unwilling to share everything. So now I'm picking and choosing what I'm going to tell people about. I kept that to myself. I ran off to Florida when I was about 23 years old and went to work for some folks down there. And I'd already had a couple of DUIs and a couple of, totaled automobiles by now, and these guys didn't know about my driving history, and they gave me a company car. And I was over watching Monday Night Football with some guys one night, some newfound friends of mine. I'm sure they were classy guys, and I left their house at halftime of the game. I'm driving down this residential street, and I don't navigate what I used to refer to as a horseshoe turn. It probably just veered about like that, but I couldn't make the turn. I drove into this tree, and I hit this tree really hard, man, and it caved in the whole passenger side of the car, broke out the front windshield, the back windshield, and ultimately it would be totaled as well. The insurance company would render it a total loss. And I was shaken up, but I wasn't badly hurt, and I'm thinking, whoa, I got to get out of here because I can't afford to get the police come and get another DUI, and I'll lose this job and just everything that goes on with that stuff. So I put the car in reverse, and remarkably, it would drive. And I backed it out of there, and I said, I'm going to get back over to my buddy's house, and we'll come up with a plan. You guys have worked on some of those plans. And I'm driving over there, the car's shaking, it's driving almost sideways. The frame's bent so badly. I'm going about 25, glass is blowing in, people are looking at me. God, just let me get over there. I got over there, and Larry, Curly, and Mo put this plan together, and the plan we came up with was that they would get back in. We'd drink a couple of cups of coffee. That would get us sober. They'd get in the car with me, and we'd drive back over there, and we'd drive the car back into the tree. And now it's a good plan, but you got to stay with me. And the theory being that we would then call the police would come, these guys would serve as witnesses and corroborate my story that I had been run off the road, probably by a drunken driver. And so we go back over there, we ease the car back into the tree. I get out of the car, I'm walking up to the house that's at the corner a lot. There weren't cell phones and stuff then. And I'm walking up to the house, and this guy comes out the side door of his house. He's running down there where we are. He's very concerned. His eyes are big as saucers. He goes, "Are you guys okay? Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, man, we're okay." He said, "Well, it's the damnedest thing." He said, "You're the second guy to hit that tree tonight." I said, "I know, man, you ought to cut that damn tree down." And it is poorly placed. And the police came, we tell them the story. And like you guys would imagine, when I tell a lie, I just give layers of detail. And So we gave the make and model of the white Ford pickup that had run me off the road. We gave the ethnicity of the driver, and we gave a partial plate number. And I got to tell you, about a week later, I got a little resentment that they hadn't brought anybody in on this thing, because you give them that kind of information, you'd think they'd at least bring someone in for questioning. But to my knowledge, that's unsolved today. You flash forward a year or two later, I'm living in Atlanta, Georgia. I'd been at a TGI Fridays all afternoon. I was throwing back kamikaze shooters and taking Tuinals. I get in my car to leave there. I am disoriented. I get on the interstate going the wrong way. I hit a car head on. 2 other cars hit us. It totaled all 4 cars. I came to in the Fulton County Jail. I'd urinated on myself. I'd vomited on myself. I hope I did, because somebody did. And you go down in the drunk tank and anything might happen. But in all earnestness, I found myself there that morning. And never had I been more humiliated at the state I found myself in my own urine and my own vomit. Never had I been more afraid of the consequences that awaited me both legally, personally, and professionally. Never had I been more ashamed of what I had done and the people that I had hurt. And as it turns out, some people went to the hospital. They weren't badly hurt. I was sued over that later. And never had I been more certain that I would never drink again. I've crossed that line now. I've done that thing that even I can't live with. And 10 days later, I'm driving down the road, drinking a bottle of wine, smoking a joint, thinking I nearly overreacted to that. Now, that's alcoholism the way I've got it, and the way the book describes it, as we talked earlier today, that there'll come a time that I won't be able to bring to consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. I'll be without defense against the drink. Fear, humiliation, shame, guilt, the love of my wife, the fear of losing a job, the prospect of going to jail, none of those are sufficient to keep me sober. What they might do is incentivize me to embrace the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, to surrender not just to the problem, but to the solution that Alcoholics Anonymous offers, which will help me avail myself of a power which will solve my power. Lack of power is my dilemma. I must find a power by which I can live. Obviously, the book says. It wasn't obvious to me yet, but as I look back, it was obvious so many times that lack of power was my dilemma. So many times that I needed a power other than mine to find a power by which I could live. I wish I could find a way of life that would offer me something other than these diversions from me. Life had become this giant diversion from me. How can I distract myself from me? I came out of that treatment center, and I wandered down to 202, which was the Friendship House in Nashville, which is the oldest clubhouse in town there. There are 3. I went upstairs, and you could turn left or right. There's usually 2 or 3 meetings going on at any given time, and I turned to my left. I went to a little room, and there were about 12 or 13 people that changed my life. They were sitting in there that day, and they were having a big book study. Now, I don't know a big book study from a speaker meeting, from an open discussion meeting. I don't know. There's different types of meetings. I've been to some. I didn't know anything about anything, and I just happened in there by God's grace. And because if I'd wandered into the open discussion meeting, and I got to tell you, I love an open discussion meeting. Unfortunately, it's because I can't wait to hear what I have to say in one. And that can happen to me there. But if I'm in a literature study, you're going to take me to the solution that Alcoholics Anonymous offers. No matter how far off track I might take the meeting, how caught up in my stuff I might get and wander out here, the next person's going to be right back in the book. And you're going to be, what our book has and what the foreword says is that it protects the integrity of the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the people in that room believed in the integrity of that message. And downstairs at the half measures table up there at 202, they called them big book thumpers, and they didn't mean it as a compliment. But I would tell you, nobody thumped me with that book up in that room. What people did was introduce me to Alcoholics Anonymous. What people did was help me find myself in that book. what people did was help me see, and they shared about themselves. And I found my sponsor, Frank, in there, my first sponsor. And Frank's a big, at the time, Frank was about 6'4", 5", and about 300 pounds. He died about 18 months ago. He was down to about 180. He was a loud, opinionated guy, and then some people didn't care for him. But he was nothing but sweet to me. But I went back in the room. I said, Frank, will you be my sponsor? This was about a month later. I was really had the interview process going for a long time. And I said, Frank, would you sponsor me? And he said, let's go back here and talk about it, kid. We go back there, and I thought we were going to talk about it. I misunderstood what he meant by that, I guess. He meant he was going to talk. And he spent about 15 minutes telling me what he wasn't going to do. He said, I ain't going to be your banker. I ain't going to be your career counselor. You know, I ain't going to be your taxi driver. I ain't going to loan you any money. And I said, till the day he died, he never loaned me any money. He kept that one. But I will tell you, I know now what he meant. That he never, over the years, I talked to him about all areas of my life. But he didn't solve those problems. What he did was help me identify the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous to how I could navigate through life and through those problems via these principles. He didn't give me marriage advice. He helped me find in Alcoholics Anonymous how to find what I was doing, what I could do differently, how these steps direct me. He introduced me to the literature. Frank's biggest gift to me was introducing me to the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous. At a year sober, I moved to Richmond, Virginia, and when I moved over there, I knew I needed to get an on-site sponsor, and he encouraged me to. Second meeting there, I met a man named Joe S., and I asked Joe to be my sponsor. Total antithesis, both in physically and personality-wise, of Frank. And what Joe has brought to the table, among other things, is how to take these principles and apply them practically in my daily living. And he also introduced me to the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous, both how to serve my group, how to serve my district, how to serve my area. He got me a job right away. He was state delegate, and I didn't even know that for quite a while. Once I knew it, I didn't know what it meant. And but when I asked Joe to be my sponsor, he says, well, why don't you meet me at this McDonald's Sunday night? He says, we'll talk about it, and then we'll go over to the meeting. And I said, okay. I meet him on Sunday night. We pull in there. Before he comes in, he says, get, as the old saying goes, get in the car. Now, he had a big van because he was a sales guy that had he had this huge van for all his samples. But the reason he was in it is we were going to an assisted living home that there was a gentleman that was a quadriplegic that we were going to help get to the meeting, and I didn't know that. We went upstairs at this home where the guy was, and we were going to. It took a lot to help get him ready to go with us. And I got to tell you, I was unbelievably uncomfortable. I so didn't want to be there. I was so self-conscious. I was so unable to be of use to this man. I was so caught up in me. And Joe is just doing this, and this guy, these guys had been through this drill before. We go to the meeting because I'm excited to go meet with Joe, because my thinking again is that the deal at McDonald's is Joe's going to want to learn all about me. I'm going to get to tell him all about me for about an hour, and nothing I like more. And I'm sure he's excited at the prospect of hearing about me. And now we're doing this, and then we go to the meeting. We go back. We help this gentleman get back to his room and in bed for the evening. Pretty soon I'm in my car driving home, and it hits me. I hadn't told him anything about me. He hadn't said anything to me about Alcoholics Anonymous other than the meeting we were in. But what I recognize is that he showed me more about what Alcoholics Anonymous is really about. He demonstrated through his actions that AA is about reaching out. It's about helping the other man. It's about carrying the message. And, in that case, we had to carry the alcoholic because he needed that help. And that Joe had a lack of self-consciousness. That's what I've learned to respect and admire in many old-timers, is a lack of self-consciousness. They don't care how it looks. They don't care what I think about how it looks. They're uninvested in these outward appearances. They're free to be who they are. That's attractive to me. I wish it would work for me sometimes, And then Joe, I'd been at a meeting one night, And I talked at great length, almost as long as I've talked here, but it wasn't a speaker meeting. And I began to worry about that, and Joe had been at the meeting. I got home and I called Joe and I said, Joe, did I sound self-righteous in that meeting? And he said, oh, Steve, you're still asking all the wrong questions, man. He said, the question isn't did you sound self-righteous, the question is were you self-righteous? He said, because see, you don't care if you were self-righteous, you're afraid you got caught. He said, the fact is that you're still worried that two people are riding home from the meeting. Boy, that's Steve. He's a self-righteous son of a gun. He said, you're worried about how you look, how you sound, not who you are. And he was so right about me, and that can be right on any given day today, that my concern will be how did it come off rather than what was the substance and what happened. Just a few years ago, my brother and I and our partners we bought a little building that we were moving our offices into, and as we were doing that, we were buying furniture for our office. We thought, well, this would be a good time. We had a little discussion and said, you know what makes sense is that we'll buy, if anybody needs something for their home, you could buy that stuff now. We're billing it through the company, and we'll get the tax advantages that come with that. You know, not a big deal. Sound like a good plan to me. And I ran it by Joe one day. I said, Joe, I said, this is what, I wasn't even looking for permission, really. I was just, I was just kind of running it by him. And he said, Steve, I don't think I would do it. And he never told me what to do. He just shared like he said, I don't think I would do it. And I said, well, Joe, I said, I know it sounds a little bit like tax fraud. And he went, no, Steve, he said, it is tax fraud. See, I got this wonderful ability to kind of think it's sort of a first cousin to tax fraud. And so what you do for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the many things you do is help me see the truth. You help me see things as they really are, so the choices and decisions I make in life are based on that truth. I'm going to end here pretty quickly because I'm anxious for Mary Jane and I to get to the question and answer period, and I know you're anxious to get through it and get to bed. But if Frank introduced me to the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous, and Joe did and continues to teach me how to practice these principles in all my affairs, there was a guy in Nashville named Mo H. And Mo was maybe as good a member of Alcoholics Anonymous as I've ever seen. And he was a guy that loved the alcoholic, drunk or sober, as much as anybody I've ever seen. And Mo always recited the verse to a poem and when he shared his story. And you guys heard me talk earlier today through the chapter We Agnostics and that conception of God and where I found him that works for me. But I heard it first in this poem that Mo would quote every time he shared. And it, in just a few short lines, describes more succinctly my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous than I've been able to do in the last hour. You know, Mo was that guy that when that perennial slipper would come back to the group and I act busy over by, getting coffee, looking down, hoping he doesn't come over there, and I don't want to mess with him again. And then you look up, and Mo is running to the guy, and he's hugging him, and he's saying, we're so glad you're back, man. I love you. I'm so glad you give him a kiss. He was a kisser, He said, I'm so glad you're back. And I look at that and go, man, it makes me want to be a better member of Alcoholics Anonymous. It makes me want to be a better man. And Mo got cancer, and just about 6 weeks before he passed away, almost 5 years ago now, 4.5 years ago, my friend Ricky and I Jerry and I, we took him to breakfast one morning, and we knew it was probably the last time that we were gonna be together. And I said, Mo, when I get the chance to share my story, would you mind if I close with the verse to that poem that you use? Because it'll help me remember you. It'll help me honor you. But more importantly, in the truest sense of Alcoholics Anonymous, it will allow me to pass on what you have given to me. And in every talk since then, I have closed with this poem. And it simply says, I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul eluded me. But I sought my fellow man and found all three. That's been my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, that it is through connecting with my fellow man, that it is the God in me and the God in you that is deep within. It is you sharing your lives with me and allowing me to share my life with you. It is as we reach out one to another that as I draw near to him, he will reveal himself to me. And the way I draw near to him is to draw near to you. So through that very simple process, Alcoholics Anonymous has allowed me to stay sober. But more importantly, you've allowed me to live a life which is both happily and usefully whole. And the word whole implies that nothing is missing. And that's the goal of Alcoholics Anonymous for me, that nothing is missing. And if nothing is missing, then nothing is missing. Thank you.